This is your news source evening bulletin for today, Friday, the 18th day of September in the year 2020. I'm Gordon Mosley. Here is what we're tracking tonight. The governments of Guyana and the United States have inked a bilateral Shipwright agreement, which will see joint patrols of Guyana's air and maritime space in an increased effort to find a narcotics trader. The agreement goes into force from next Monday. It formed part of the discussions with President Irfan Ali and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during his visit today. Under the agreement, the U.S. government will have to seek Guyana's permission for the patrols on sea and in the air. Patrols will not be conducted in Guyana's waters without that approval from Guyana. President Irfan Ali said he's pleased with the Shipwright agreement and believes it will do more than just enhance security for Guyana's exclusive economic zone.
I am pleased to announce that Guyana and the U.S. will deepen cooperation in the area of security with specific attention to maritime security and joint patrols to interdict narcotics trafficking. This will also allow us to improve our technical and human capabilities in monitoring Guyana's exclusive economic zone. This augurs well for stronger collaboration and broader technical assistance to help combat both domestic and transnational organized criminal networks.
President Ali told the U.S. Secretary of State that Guyana is looking forward to continued and enhanced assistance in the fields of border control, anti-terrorism, cybersecurity, technology transfer, and anti-corruption measures. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the security agreement will ensure a more secured Guyana and Caribbean region.
Our new security agreement to counter narcotics trafficking, something that has decimated so many nations all across the world, will enter into force on Monday. Our law enforcement, American law enforcement, can now cooperate against traffickers at sea. This will make the entire region and Guyana even safer.
Mr. Pompeo said Guyana and the U.S. will continue to work in various areas of interest that will benefit both nations. The two sides also signed a framework agreement today that seeks to facilitate collaboration to identify concrete ways to further their joint interests in infrastructure, growth, integration, and energy security. Both sides believe that investors and the private sector in both Guyana and the U.S. stand to benefit from the agreement. The visit by the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo marked the first time that a sitting U.S. Secretary of State has ever visited Guyana. Mr. Pompeo assured that it will not take another 50 years for another visit to take place. More news coming up in a moment.
The government of Guyana invites supermarkets and shops in all regions to submit expressions of interest to supply items for the COVID-19 Public Assistance Program Phase 2. Applicants must demonstrate capacity to supply canned and bottled food products, dry and fresh rations valued between $25,000 to $32,000 per voucher, have adequate space in their business as per COVID-19 guidelines, or for sanitation facilities. Interested applicants can uplift the expression of interest form and selection criteria from the Civil Defense Commission in Georgetown or at your nearest regional executive officer's office between 9 to 15 hours, or request by email at pavpgy@gmail.com. Kindly deposit completed forms on or before 9 hours September 30, 2020, along with copies of valid business registration or certificate of incorporation and NIS and GRA compliance into the tender box at the National Procurement and Tender Administration, Main and Urquhart Streets, Georgetown. These must be in a sealed envelope, clearly marked expression of interest to supply items under the COVID-19 Voucher Assistance Program Phase 2. No expression of interest will be accepted by email. The Civil Defense Commission reserves the right to accept or reject.
Falls, the official distributors of Castrol Marine, Mining and Power Gen lubricants in Guyana, now has in stock CRB engine oils, high-spin hydraulic oil, Vecton semi-synthetic truck oils, and Sultex cylinder oils. For the best prices, check our dealers countrywide or visit Falls Gas Station at Land of Canaan, East Bank, Demerara, or call the commercial manager on 608-4998. Castrol, it's more than just oil, it's liquid engineering.
Guyana, we've been through it all.
But as a people, we have
weathered every storm
And risen to every challenge.
Because it is the people of Guyana
that gives it its strength.
all the people,
regardless of race,
class, or religion.
we are one people, one strength.
And now is our time. A time to rise. Together, we rise.
Mobil Special and all other Mobil lubricants are distributed by Salt Guyana Inc. Mobil Special and all other Mobil lubricants are distributed by Salt Guyana Inc. Welcome back. Declaring the 2020 national budget as deceptive, APNU AFC Member of Parliament Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford today lambasted the budget as having everything for the private sector and nothing for the ordinary man.
UPNU AFC is pro-people. We are not anti-private sector, we are pro-people. But when we look at the range of measures, Mr. Speaker, that have been announced by this government, we find that they're overwhelmingly skewed in favor of the private sector, overwhelmingly beneficial to the private sector. The measures fall short of providing relief to the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, this is not the time for a private sector budget. Mr. Speaker, how does bringing back cars, used cars, and old tires assist in solving the problems of COVID?
Mr. Ford said the budget should have catered more for the ordinary man, especially under the current economic crunch because of the coronavirus pandemic.
As the Honorable Member, Mr. Bishop Edgell, stated in his administration, is decidedly pro-sector. The Honorable Member, Mr. Indar, said, yes, this budget is pro-private sector. Mr. Speaker, this government states that this is an emergency budget to cater for COVID-19, to cater for the threats that COVID-19 poses to this country. Mr. Speaker, there is not a single emergency measure to ensure that the people of this country are capable of accessing education and health services.
He said while the government has described the budget as being an emergency budget, there was no emergency consultation with anyone, and that has resulted in a budget that will allow old cars and used tires to be imported as part of key measures.
Mr. Speaker, the budget is skewed in favor of the private sector in the face of debt, in the face of pain and suffering of the ordinary Guyanese people. In the hinterland, in the Northwest District, on the Quarantine Coast, in Georgetown, if we move tax on fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides, and other inputs in the poultry sector.
The attorney said despite the government's statement that the treasury was empty and the nation was badly managed, the minister who presented the budget was forced to admit to the economic growth that occurred under the APNU AFC administration, and that points to the deceptive nature of the budget.
The budget starts off on the premise that it seeks to conceal that this PPPC outfit inherited a well-run, well-managed, functioning economy but they were nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, compelled to confess it on the pages of this budget. At paragraph 3.1, they acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, that the real GDP grew by 5.4%, that non-oil growth was pegged at 4.3%. They had to acknowledge it, Mr. Speaker. They acknowledge at paragraph 3.9 that the mining and quarrying industries expanded by over 10.6%, that the emerging petroleum and glass and support services grew by 124%, and that gold mining, quarrying, and bauxite all grew also. That the manufacturing industry grew by 14.7% in 2019. Rice and other manufacturing increased by 26.4% and 14% respectively. Construction grew by 3.1%. Real estate mortgages grew by 6.9%. Loans for industrial and commercial properties increased by 19.2%, and growth in borrowing for private dwellings by 5.9%. So this impression, Mr. Speaker, that they want to give the nation that APNU AFC did nothing for 5 years is dishonest. But I am not surprised, Mr. Speaker. I'm not surprised, Mr. Speaker, because dishonesty is associated with fraudulent, and they're a fraudulent government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the service industry grew by 4.2%. Expansions in all major industries. These are the words of the Honorable Member Wen Edgel. Wholesale and retail grew by 5%. Administrative and support services grew by 5.8%, and transport and storage by 6.9%. Mr. Speaker, what I've just referred to is the result of sound policies and careful management of the nation affairs by the APNU AFC government.
Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford said what the budget has in fact done is set the blueprint for the return of societal collapse, high crime, discrimination, marginalization, and oppression. He said it is clear that the PPP will move ahead with the budget despite the shortcomings. Turning now to the education sector, as the Ministry of Education rolls out its at-home learning sessions for students as the schools remain closed, Education Minister Priya Manik-Chan today called on the APNU AFC opposition to join the government to ensure the success of the efforts. During her contribution to the budget debates today, Minister Manik-Chan reminded that schools across the country have been closed since March. She said the former government left no proper plan in place to cater for continuous learning. The budget, she said, supports the government's plan to assist teachers and students in the teaching and learning efforts, and she wants the opposition on board in the interest of educating the nation's children.
You left your teachers undirected, you left your students unengaged, you did nothing. So what we ask you to do now, when we have a program in place that we tell you will not be perfect, we ask you to walk with us, join hands and make sure we can educate Guyana's children. That's what we ask you to do. And if you truly love them, and if you stand a chance of ever crossing that floor to come over here, you have to work with us because you don't have a plan by yourself.
Minister Manik-Chan admitted that the current plan to engage students is not perfect, and there are areas that the plan is not meeting. But she assured that once the government and the opposition work together in the interest of the nation's children, the plan will be improved. Ms. Manik-Chan also used her budget debate contribution to blast contractors for the sloth of work on school construction projects. She highlighted millions of budgeted and contracts signed for school rehabilitation and construction, and the projects are still incomplete. She said the former government must take the blame for that and ought not to attempt to defend the contractors.
I'm sounding a warning now to contractors who will work with us, that we are not going to tolerate this kind of sloth and neglect on the projects that this government has. I see Mr. Ramjatan defending this contract, and that's interesting to see. Look at St. Rose's, Mr. Speaker. St. Rose's was awarded in August 2018. It was supposed to finish on in March 2020. So today's date, 8% is finished.
The Education Minister said the PPP government is going to be stricter with contractors. In addition to the budgeted amount for the education sector, the government has also announced additional funds to prepare schools for their eventual reopening. That reopening will be based on guidance from the Ministry of Health. More than a year after the U.S. government formally recognized the Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido as the country's interim president, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, has not budged from his position and appears to be strengthening his hold on power in the neighboring state. The U.S. government has been stepping up its calls for Mr. Maduro to leave office. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is visiting the countries that border Venezuela, during a press conference this morning here in Guyana, reaffirmed the U.S. government's position that the Venezuelan leader needs to demit office.
We know that the Maduro regime has decimated the people of Venezuela, and that Maduro himself is an indicted narcotics trafficker. This means he has to leave. For the people of Venezuela to have the democracy that they need, the Cuban security forces must go, and Maduro must.
In March of this year, the U.S. government formally indicted the Venezuelan president on narcotics trafficking charges and issued a wanted bulletin for his arrest. Still, the Venezuelan leader continues to hold on to power, even as an economical crisis has forced hundreds of his citizens into Guyana seeking refugee status, and thousands more into Brazil and Colombia. The U.S. Secretary of State today praised Guyana for taking in the Venezuelan refugees and announced a $5 million donation to Guyana to assist the Venezuelans who have sought refuge in this country. While Guyana maintains its position not to interfere in the internal affairs of Venezuela, the country has supported the positions of the Organization of American States and the Lima Group, which have both been pressing for regime change in neighboring Venezuela. Almost 2 weeks since the badly mutilated, lifeless bodies of Isaiah and Joel Henry were found in the Cotton Tree Bag Dam on the west coast of Berbice, police investigators are still to solve the gruesome crime. In a statement this morning, the police force said it is still searching for two main suspects in the case. The force has not provided any detail on the two wanted persons, but indicated today that the investigators will continue to exhaust all leads in search of the two suspects and anyone else behind the murders. The police force carried out a major operation yesterday in the backlands of number 2 and number 3 villages in search of the murder scene. The force set a total of 75 ranks, including investigators from the Criminal Investigations Department and the Major Crimes Unit, were part of the search, which was supported by aerial searches by the GDF's helicopter. After searching the backlands for 7 hours, nothing of evidential value was found. Government pathologist Dr. Nihal Singh was also part of the search. Police investigators intend to remain in the area, hoping to find the scene of the crime. The investigators are convinced that the teenage cousins were murdered in one area and their bodies taken to the Cotton Tree Bag Dam. When the bodies were found, one was partly buried and the other was hidden under a clump of bushes. Both teenagers suffered multiple injuries, including chops to the neck, head, and back, which resulted in a severed spine for both. The murder of the young men has gripped the nation. The president and the opposition leader have both issued statements on the double murder, calling for justice. The president has said the police force will be provided with all the needed resources to ensure a thorough investigation. In the courts, 4 men from the west coast of Berbice were today charged and remanded to jail for the murder of taxi driver Mohammed Hanif. The murder occurred on the 12th of September at the Bath settlement home of the taxi driver during the course of a suspected robbery. Appearing in court today were 56-year-old Sarju Matadin, 52-year-old Devon McCalmont, 29-year-old Royston Dowden, and 21-year-old Ivan Lindo. The 4 are accused of breaking into the home of the taxi driver and savagely beating him while demanding money and valuables. The man was also chopped to the body. The 4 robbers left empty-handed, and the badly beaten and chopped man was pronounced dead after he was taken to a hospital. His wife, who was also at home at the time, was questioned by the police as it was suspected that she might have hired the 4 men to attack her husband. She has not been charged for any crime but is still under investigation. The 4 accused have been remanded to jail and will make their next court appearance in October. Across the Region is coming up next. Delvac and all other mobile lubricants are distributed by Salt Guyana Inc. Mobile Delvac and all other mobile lubricants are distributed by Salt Guyana Inc.
We all know a strong educational foundation is a key to successful learning. Global Technology combines award-winning curriculum with innovative technology and teacher support to help students reach their potential. Our online platform creates an engaging learning experience. Using any device, you can be a part of amazing class discussions, collaborate with others, and have access to virtual learning software. With our multiple payment methods, you will never have to leave home. Find out how Global Technology can allow you to learn anything, anywhere, at any time.
Falls, the official distributors of Castrol Marine, Mining and Power Gen lubricants in Guyana, now has in stock CRB engine oils, high-spin hydraulic oil, Vecton semi-synthetic truck oils, and Sultex cylinder oils. For the best prices, check our dealers countrywide or visit Falls gas station at Land of Canaan, East Bank, Demerara, or call the commercial manager on 608-4998. Castrol, it's more than just oil, it's liquid engineering.
We are legions of men standing strong, but never too proud to stoop and help someone. We must send a clear signal to all. Do right, walk in upright ways, knowing that's what being a man is all about. And ever aware that things will only get worse when good men do nothing. Stand strong. Be the one to live right.
Mobile Delvac and all other mobile lubricants are distributed by Salt Guyana Inc. Mobile Delvac and all other mobile lubricants are distributed by Salt Guyana Inc. Across the region right now, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service says it will be monitoring persons who have tested positive for coronavirus and are confined to quarantine at home, amid reports that they have not been adhering to the protocols to remain indoors. The Police Commissioner Gary Griffith said the police service through the 85 emergency response patrol vehicles and other patrols in all 9 divisions will be involved in the stepped-up patrols. Trinidad and Tobago has 3,434 positive cases of the virus, with 1,905 being active. The health authorities said that 2,061 patients have been at home, quarantined under the continuous monitoring of health officials. But this does not include those who are in quarantine awaiting results, having been a primary or secondary contact. The police commissioner said that it has come to the attention of the police service that persons who have tested positive for the virus and placed in home quarantine have been breaking the public health ordinance regulations, and now the police force will be keeping its eyes on them. This evening, there are signs in Latin America that the pandemic's epicenter is moving to Argentina. The country broke its daily new infection record on Thursday with almost 13,000 new cases of coronavirus, pushing the country's total to more than 600,000. A nationwide lockdown introduced in March still remains in place, although from late August, groups of 10 have been allowed to meet outside and some restaurants able to operate. The measures had managed to control the spread of the virus, but on the 5th of September, the country recorded more than 12,000 cases. Meanwhile, the virus appears to be stabilizing or slowing down in hard-hit countries, Brazil and Mexico. The latest figures from the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control show that of the 3, Argentina is currently the worst hit according to its population size. Its 14-day cumulative number of cases was 332 per 100,000 persons on Thursday. And finally tonight, international news. TikTok and WeChat will be banned from US app stores from this coming Sunday, unless President Donald Trump agrees to a last-minute deal. The Department of Commerce in the US said it would bar people in the US from downloading the messaging and video sharing apps through any app store on any platform. The Trump administration says the companies threaten national security and could pass user data to China. But China and both companies have denied that. WeChat will effectively shut down in the US on Sunday, but people will still be able to use TikTok until the 12th of November, when it could also be fully banned. And that's your News Source Evening Bulletin for tonight. I'm Gordon Mosley, reporting. Have a good weekend.